Hello, my fellow extraordinary Americans. My name is Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America? Well, you see, America has always been about freedom, opportunity, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt. Wealth and income inequality is the norm now, and the middle class has all but disappeared. So Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and the descendant of immigrants restoring the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through financial education. It is through becoming entrepreneurs and investors on the light side. In this podcast, I interview fellow Americans who fought against the odds. Many of them came from humble beginnings to see how they did it. It is my hope through these interviews that the extraordinary within you shall awaken and that you will abolish financial slavery from your life and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Welcome back to the show, my fellow extraordinary Americans. For today's guest, we have David Corsini. David is a certified trainer and coach of neurolinguistic programming, as well as a public speaker and business strategist. He's the CEO of the Activated Potential, where he helps his clients with goal setting, problem solving, and business strategy. After years of struggling to find his identity, David decided to go on a journey with one question in mind: who am I supposed to be? Which finally led him to his purpose. He's committed to unlocking the human code and teaching others how to access their genius. David is an extraordinary American, and I'm honored and grateful to have him on the show. David, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey, David, it's amazing to have you on the show. Like, I'm really grateful you took the time to do this interview with me. So, David, I know that you are a certified NLP teacher, business strategist, and also like a CEO. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you got started?
So a little bit about my background, and I know this is big for you. I was born in Italy, so I am an immigrant. I was born with dual citizenship, which is pretty cool. So I could actually run for president if I wanted to. That's what that means.
That is
My
awesome.
my mom had gotten her citizenship before I was born, and so that's how I was born with two. Um, And anyway, we came here when I was 5, and my father always lived there, so every summer I pretty much went back and forth. So I spent the whole summer, every summer in Italy, and then the rest of the year in the US. So it's almost like I was raised in 2 countries at the same time, and it was pretty cool to witness and get both cultures in my DNA, essentially. And kind of how I got into my entrepreneurial journey, I always knew I wanted to invest in real estate. So I got my real estate license, and early on, I was in my 20s. You know, I felt like I was doing very well, but I realized I had kind of this void in the middle of my heart. And I was trying to fill it with commission checks. I was filling it up with partying, with women, with alcohol, and all these things. And I had a tough time staying at home. So I was like, oh, I'm just an extrovert. But when I say if I stayed at home more than 2 days at a time, I felt anxiety. So essentially what I was doing was I was trying to numb it out by going and partying and distracting myself. And, I had this whisper in my head, like, there's so much more to you. Like, there's more to your potential. And I kept hearing this, like, potential, potential, potential. And it kept getting louder and louder. And one day I ended up at a Tony Robbins event. And Tony Robbins will say potential in practically every other sentence he says. So he had me captivated. I was like, yes, my full potential. I'm all for it, whatever it takes. And I remember I signed up for more events. And I remember being in Fiji for his Life and Wealth Mastery. And one of my friends, when I was there, was like, hey, David, everything Tony says is NLP. And I remember leaning in and I was like, what does that mean? So it's like neurolinguistic programming. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Much like some of these listeners will probably have no idea what I'm talking about right now. But essentially, I started to research it. And I was like, if Tony Robbins, and for those of you that don't know Tony Robbins, he's essentially helped 50 plus million people in the world with mindset and business strategy and all these things. He's the guy presidents call when they're in trouble. He's the guy billionaires call when they're in trouble. So I was like, there's got to be something to this NLP thing. So I did what any sane person would do. And in the thick of the pandemic in like June, July of 2020, I went to an in-person event to learn NLP. So within a few years, I pretty much got every certification possible in NLP. And what I actually realized is NLP is the words we use program our mind, neurolinguistic programming. And I broke it down into three main categories, right? The words we use with ourselves, so like that self-talk we have, the words we use with others, and then the words other people use with us can all program us. And what I realized in learning all about this and how the mind is actually programmed, because they teach us a lot of things in school, but they don't teach us how to use the most powerful computer in the world, aka our own mind.
Totally. I agree with you.
So as I learned all these things, I actually realized the deeper problem to that void I had. And once I got to the deeper problem, the releasing it was pretty simple. And once it was gone, I felt this newfound fulfillment. And from that place, I found my purpose. And where before I felt like I was driven by fear or by anger, where I was pushing and pushing and pushing, and maybe I would burn out, but then I'd push through some burnout and keep going and going. It felt like I was pulled afterwards. And business just became easier. So I believe business is actually an expression of who we are. And our business can never truly exceed the level of where we are personally. And if it does, it's only temporary. And that's where I see a lot of people, be on top and then within a year, like lose it all. Because their business actually surpassed the level that they were at. So normally, what I realized with myself is my business was kind of like up and down because I wasn't very grounded in where I was.
David,
Once I started to put those together, it all changed.
David, you bring up so many interesting points. Like, I don't even know like where to begin. But one of the things that you mentioned is that the inner chatter, right? There were the three things you're talking about, where you have the inner chatter where you're talking to yourself, where you're talking to others and then others are talking to you. And I know this is like, it seems like basic and obvious, but like a lot of people don't master their own minds. They don't understand the inner chatter that they keep telling themselves, the negativity that they put within themselves, or whether it is like they're talking while they're talking to others, they're essentially creating a low self-worth. But self-worth is ultimately what you tell yourself. So if you could tell the audience the relationship between their inner chatter and the self-worth that they have as human beings, like how would the audience take advantage of that and change that aspect?
So as you dive in deep, there's actually conscious inner chatter and there's subconscious inner chatter. And what people don't realize, if I could ever dilute personal development into 2 sentences, it would be: you get what you focus on, and what you focus on expands. So when you have inner chatter, your mind is focusing on whatever that inner chatter is. As it focuses on that, the more inner chatter you have that's negative, the more you will get negative. The more inner chatter you have that's positive, the more positive you get, because that's what you're focusing on. And as you said, like, most people haven't mastered their mind. I always say, if you don't master your mind, you'll be a slave to it. Mastering your mind should be one of the things they teach us in school, and how to use it. But as I said before, they don't teach us. We're not given a manual for the most powerful computer in the whole world that we're given to at birth. It's wild. So once you understand the way the mind works, it's like playing Monopoly and not knowing the rules, and playing Monopoly and knowing the rules and knowing all the tricks and all the secrets. Like, your chances of winning greatly increase. And that's the same thing as understanding the way the mind works and mastering it.
No, I agree 100%. But here's the thing. A lot of people, they have this inner chatter, but they identify with these thoughts and their beliefs, their negative beliefs. So like it's one of the basics I learned while I was like meditating, right? Like you basically sit down for a long period of time, and then all these thoughts race through your mind. And then you're taught to be non-attached and just observe these thoughts, and then you realize you're not your thoughts. You're like the awareness behind your thoughts. But most people today, they attach themselves and identify themselves with this negative chatter and the beliefs that are stemming forth from it. And from identity stems your beliefs and your capabilities and all the actions that come about. So what would you advise somebody that is already on autopilot and is already having these negative thought patterns, and how would you tell them to start altering it and changing this from your perspective?
So I'm so glad you brought up identity, because identity is very important, right? One of the things when you're changing who you are essentially changing your identity. Now, if you identify as someone being poor, you will always end up poor.
Totally.
One of the things I notice about people who have had addictions, the people that have a greater chance of an extended amount of sobriety are the ones that just detach from the identity of being an addict or being a smoker. Most people, though, will say, I've been sober for 5 years. I've been sober for 2 years, which still means they're holding on to the identity of being an addict. So, for example, I was probably an alcoholic back in the day. I don't count the times I was sober, I never counted days. I actually will have a drink here or there. But my beingness, my identity is, it's not who I'm a healthy person. So a healthy person just naturally doesn't really drink. They don't have to like think about not drinking. It just, you don't do it because that's who you are. So one of the things I tell people is your identity is kind of an assortment of beliefs you have. It's an assortment of values you have. It's an assortment of different things you identify with yourself, like associations you have. So for example, I am Italian. I used to think it was okay to be angry because I was Italian. I associated being
Wait,
Italian.
are Italians usually angry? Like, I have no idea.
Hot-headed, put it that way. We're warmer blooded.
All right.
Now, and that goes with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different nationalities. We have certain associations, right? So because I am this, I have to be this. So what I would tell someone is the first step to any change is awareness. When you bring the things that are subconscious to your conscious, you can easily change them. So one of the things I started to do was realize what my true values are. Now, your values are what are important to you, and you can have different values in different areas of your life, just like you can have broader life values. What you value in career could differ greatly based on what you value in a relationship or in health. Whatever area of life you're looking to truly change, and maybe if it's life, your whole entire life, focus on life, and ask yourself these questions. What is important to me about blank? So life or career or health or relationship. And ask yourself that, like, write everything down. Normally values are about a word, 2 or 3, right? So if you get a sentence about what's important to you, look at that sentence and think about, okay, of that sentence, what's really important about this? And you usually come up with a word. Make a list and keep asking yourself, like, make a detailed list and then think about in that area or in life, what are the things I really want to feel in this area? Like the emotions. And rather than saying, I don't want to feel stressed, think about what the opposite of that is. So maybe you want to feel peace. So think of the things you actually want to feel. And then make a list of all of those things, and you'll probably have a good idea of what your values are. Now, one of the most important things is knowing what these values actually mean to you. So think about what those values are. Think about what they are not. Think about why they're important. And here are 2 key things. How do those values get fulfilled? And how do they get crossed or violated? Because knowing how your values get fulfilled is actually the science of fulfillment.
Wow.
It's very simple to know how to feel fulfilled when your values are getting fulfilled. But we're not taught that values are one of the most important. They're essentially our operating system, right? Whatever's important to you is what you will spend time on. Now, what most people don't realize is if they're lacking something, it's usually because it might be a value, but it's not very high on their list, especially subconsciously. So if there's something on your list you feel like you lack that you really want, take a look at it and notice what associations you may have to it. So normally the 3 greatest results people want, or 4 biggest results people want, are more money, more freedom, better health, and better relationships. More or less, you can break down most people's deepest wants to one of those 4 things. If you're lacking one of those things, you've got to realize what's lacking in the values of that thing.
No, totally.
And looking at the associations, when a lot of people don't have the money they want, they actually have a lot of trauma or negative associations to money. Like maybe when they were children, their parents had a very scarcity mindset, and subconsciously we just act like our parents. So we learn subconsciously, well, this is what's going on. There isn't enough money. We can't get enough food. We can't do enough of this. And sometimes there's plenty of money, but the way the parents act because of that money will actually add negative associations to money. If you have negative associations to money, you need to repair that relationship before you can bring it in. It's like saying, you know, women are the root of all evil, and then me wanting to call in my soulmate. It's not going to end up well, right? So a lot of people feel like either money is the root of all evil, or you can't get paid for doing good. It's tough to make money then. Either that, or you've got to do really shitty things to make money.
You're so right about that. Yeah, that's usually how a lot of people think about money, you know, and then they are generally good people, but they associate it with like bad associations, and then they don't end up getting it, even though money is an important resource in order to magnify the good that you already have.
Mm-hmm.
But David, so let's say you want to change your identity, right? You have this identity that is associated with all this negativity, and then you have to have this new identity that will have the values necessary, the belief systems and the values necessary to do that. There's a transition process usually, right? From this old identity to the new identity. But during this transition process, a lot of people get a lot of self-doubt where they're like, who are you kidding? You're being fake. This is not you. This is not the real you, right? And I'm sure like when you were transitioning from like the alcoholic to like new personality, you had a lot of this inner chatter where you're like, this is not you. Like, who are you kidding? And all that stuff. How would you advise somebody that wants to transform to a new identity and then like has to transform from the old identity to the new identity? And how would you go about doing it?
So I believe change happens in an instant when we're ready. So if you've ever studied people that have had near-death experiences, a lot of them afterwards are like completely different people, or they act like they're the same physical body, but they act so differently. And it literally happened in the moment that it was the near-death experience. Now, what's actually happening from a scientific perspective, from a neurological perspective, is their values have completely realigned. So many of these people have seen God or seen the afterlife and then come back and have a completely different perspective on life, and maybe are more connected to their soul. So their values actually completely change. So that identity completely changes. One of the things I help people with is that alignment with the values, because that's literally like changing your identity in a snap. Now, if you don't have those tools, great. First, you need to become aware. So you've got to do that practice that we talked about, and you can journal some of those things. Now, you realize who you are. I would say look at the parts of you that you want to keep. Always be grateful for the parts of you that you want. The parts of you that have gotten you to where you're at. Maybe those parts will have gotten you to where you're at. They might not get you to the next level. So you're like, thank you. No longer need you. But start to make a list of the things you want to be instead. So most people, when they're creating goals, look at what they want to have. And then they make this whole thing about what they want to have. They look at their goal and then they decide, okay, what do I need to do to have those things? And then they create a list, an actionable list, a whole strategy, all these actions. And then they look at who do I need to be in order to do those things. I think that's ass backwards. This is why we have so many people in this country that have actually achieved so much success and feel so empty inside. Because they made all of those goals for having things, but ended up being the person they're not meant to be.
Wow.
So what I say is look at who you are now and start deciding who you want to be instead. Now, if you have no idea who you want to be, look at the things you want to have and think about why you want to have them. What do you want to feel like by owning those things or by achieving those things? Do you want to feel freedom? Do you want to feel peace? Do you want to feel happiness? Do you want to feel successful? Do you want to feel all these things? Good. Now make a list of the things you want to be.
So, David, you bring up an important point, but like where you're talking about identity, right? And like about most people identifying like with all these goals and then they're setting it. So like, the American identity is about freedom and the relentless pursuit of happiness. But as you said, like most people are associating the pursuit of happiness with all these goals of like getting the house, getting the car, getting all the hot girls and all that stuff, but they're still feeling empty inside. So from your perspective, like as a continuation of what you're already saying, like how would Americans basically realign their identity to their true path and purpose?
Yep. So once you realize who you want to be, realize what those things are important to you. A lot of those things you want to be will be like new values. I want to be free. Well, what is free? Very arbitrary, right? What does freedom mean? Freedom's complete. If you lived in a concentration camp, freedom's completely different than someone who's a billionaire. Like their concept of what they want as freedom can be completely different. No two people have the same definition of freedom. No two people have the same definition of peace. So start to understand the things you want to be and what those things truly mean to you. And make a list of those things. Now, as you start to create this list, you're going to realize a lot about yourself, a lot about what's truly important to you. And this goes back to the values thing. How they get fulfilled. Understand if you want to be free, How does freedom get fulfilled? If you want to feel peace, how does peace feel? How does it get fulfilled? How do you know you have peace? Most people think about achieving freedom and actually end up owning 10 different businesses and working 80 hours a week. But if I own 10 businesses, I know I'll be free. Well, they didn't take the time to figure out what freedom meant to them and how to even achieve it. So create a list of who you want to be and why you want those things, and make that the most important thing in your life. Read it every morning when you wake up and every evening when you go to sleep. Slowly but surely, and I've done this, and when I go back to the list, I'm like, oh my God, I'm literally being the person I wanted to be years ago. It's like incredible. Because I focused on those things, right? You get what you focus on, and what you focus on expands. The more you focus on the things you want to be, you desire to be, the more you start to be those things. And as you are being those things, you naturally do the things that that person would do. And you start to have the things that that person would have. If you want to be successful and you keep telling yourself, I am successful, I am successful, I am successful, or every road leads to success, or make sure you believe it. Every day I'm getting more and more successful. Every single day, every single day, every single day. You're going to focus on it more and more. You will naturally end up having those things.
So, David, I wanted to ask you as a continuation of what you just said right now, right? Because I think it's really applicable to most Americans today. Like most people right now are literally doing jobs that that's not aligning with who they are and their path and purpose and their passion. But the excuse they give themselves is that, oh, I have to pay the bills. I gotta do this because I gotta because otherwise how am I gonna pay the bills and all that? But their true passion purpose could be in something else. So from a NLP standpoint, what thoughts and actions do you think should Americans take to start the transition process from like doing a job that just merely pays the bills to what they truly to unleashing their true potential in a thing that they're actually passionate about?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record. And going back to your values, and if you do that little journaling exercise and you realize how those values get fulfilled and how they get crossed, by purely doing that, you'll notice if your job aligns with your values or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, take those values and start to they want freedom. What freedom means to them. They don't know how freedom gets. Creating a job business takes up more time and gives them less freedom than they. Being an entrepreneur is not always become free. Like, so understanding how your values get fulfilled.
Hello, David, can you hear me?
my job, fulfill my values. And if it can't, first find a different job, different whatever, and put a plan in place to get from A to B.
Yeah, that's thank you for giving that strategy altogether, because yeah, a lot of people, they do want to know how, but they basically don't really know how, the mindset or where to start regarding that. But
Yeah.
David, on a different note, like I know you started the activated potential, right? So can you tell me, the audience, a little bit more about the premise of how you started this, and what is the what made you start this thing to help the people and clients achieve their goals and their visions?
Yeah. So essentially, I went through quite a bit of pain, not feeling fulfilled, all these things. I was pretty self-destructive at times. And through all that pain, I realized once I healed myself, once I resolved those and released those things that were holding me back, that it was actually my purpose to help others do so as well. I had amassed all the tools I needed to help myself, but really I was amassing those tools to help myself to then help others. And as I kept going on and helping other people, I started to realize, for me, as I was saying before, I believe when you get your business or career right on the right path, it makes all the other areas of life easier. So if you've got a lot of money coming in with very flexible times, it is easier to have a romantic relationship. It's easier to spend more time with family. You have more money to buy healthier groceries, healthier food, not eat all the processed stuff. You have more money to hire a personal trainer, get in shape, do all those things. You've got time and flexibility to go on a spiritual journey for a week or two if you want. So for me, career and business is the vehicle for us to experience all that life has to offer. And that's why I like the strategy between our professional and our personal lives and getting that aligned. And when you really create from that place, then everything else is so much easier and you start to experience more of life. And normally our purpose, I would say most people's purpose, has something to do with career. If you're helping people, chances are you've got to make money to help people, or you're getting paid to help people. Very rarely, like unless you're a stay-at-home parent and you feel like that's your purpose. But then I've also noticed a lot of stay-at-home parents, once the kids leave the household, they feel completely unfulfilled because their identity has only been to be stay-at-home parents. So even there, if they had had a side something to make money that they're passionate about, normally the things we're passionate about are things we can make money with. And that's what I love about career. That's what I love about business. So I had built, a real estate business, another business. I was really good at giving strategic advice to people. And then I learned all these tools to actually help them personally. And I started to put them together. and it started to like exponentially help people. So from what we talked about before, I help a lot of people with their identity, with their values, and with the strategy to implement all those things. Because it's one thing to know something, it's another to know it and implement it.
Totally.
And that's where we take all the things, we align yourself up, and then we strategically go in that direction that aligns with you.
David, I want to let you know that I would recommend my audience to basically like definitely reach out to you if they want to change their identity. Because like regarding NLP, like one thing I don't think my audience knows about is like when I was in college, I did study neurolinguistic programming a little bit, like while like it was like a passion of mine. And I came across a book called by Richard Bandler, Frogs into Princess, and then I just understood like how much potential that there is truly in the mind, and everything happens on a subconscious level, and what you do focus on expands. And a lot of time people focus on the wrong things, which is like basically the negative stuff in their lives, because ultimately on a subconscious level they like to get the attention that comes from complaining, you know. And I don't know if you realize this, like with a lot of people around you over your lifetime, but they feed off that attention because they equate it with love, but ultimately that does not serve you in the long term. Like you have to transform your identity. You got to transform the inner chatter. And to my audience, I think that you're basically what you're teaching and what you're helping with your clients is absolutely necessary, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you. And what you just described in NLP is called a secondary gain. So people can have secondary gains for a problem that they have, something that's holding them back. And just like what you said, we all have an incredible potential. The only one holding us back is ourselves. And most of us have caged in our potential. And that's why I named the business The Activated Potential, to activate it. It's not just potential. You've got to activate it and then unleash it.
So, David, quick question regarding potential. So, you know, Americans' identity is an immigrant entrepreneur identity, and like it, a lot of people think it has a lot of potential. So, like, what, from your perspective, what is the potential of America altogether with the identity it has?
Well, I'm going to come to a place of, I believe a lot of Americans are competing against one another. And we've been taught that competition is good because it leads to innovation. Now, I'm going to take a quick little, let's just talk about whether you agree with it or not. Let's talk about how quickly the COVID vaccines came out when COVID hit. Everyone thinks competition is good. Now, what happens if every single pharmaceutical company in every single country had been collaborating together to create a COVID vaccine? I believe we would have ended up with a vaccine that was more effective, probably less of those, side effects, way quicker. Because what usually happens with competition, if you look at from the sense of countries, two countries bordering each other that compete over the same resources. Normally what happens is once the resources start to go down, they start to go at war. If you have 100 resources after a war, you'll essentially have 50 resources because you were completely competing and fighting over everything and destroyed stuff and all that. Now, what happens if you take those two countries, you give them the same 100 resources, and you have them collaborate and co-create things together? Well, you actually start to multiply. So I believe the US has so much potential. If we stopped competing between different races, just started to include everyone and everything, between the different genders, between people that were born here and weren't, if we just all came together and co-created together, collaborated, we would be able to exponentially grow in this country. But what happens is competition comes from fear. It's the fear that there aren't enough resources. It's the fear there isn't enough power for everyone. So then the ones that do keep it for themselves. It's the fear that there isn't enough money. So then the wealthy just keep it for themselves. It's the fear that there aren't enough clients. So we're going to fight over these clients. But if you notice, Thomas Edison didn't compete against candlestick makers when he created the incandescent light bulb. He created something new. I don't believe Elon Musk created Tesla to compete with car companies. He created something different that was in conjunction with Solar City. Jeff Bezos did not create Amazon to compete with eBay. He actually was looking to create the supply chain behind the scenes, the whole distribution. It was completely different. They created something that was completely new. Now, I'm not saying Elon created the first electric car, but Elon created the culture around it and the idea that you can have a self-sustaining home and car all together, because that's his vision. There are people that create and there are people that compete. And what I notice is the people that create end up with more wealth and are more fulfilled in doing so. And they help others create wealth as well.
David, you hit the nail in like right on the head. You know, like, yes, American identity for the longest time has been about competition. And we have to start having an identity that stems from creation and collaboration and abundance. And when we as Americans do think in terms of co-creation, helping each other out, and then like thinking in terms of abundance and collaboration, that's when the extraordinariness in America will truly come about, you know? So yeah, I agree with that.
And you've seen it during some of the wars, like the revolution happened when everyone came together and started maybe not every person was on board, but enough people were creating and collaborating together. They created the revolution. Pearl Harbor happened and everyone united. Now, good or bad, I'd like to see us unite in not a time of war. 9/11, same thing happened. The United States united again. Let's do it from a place of love and not fear and not because of a war this time.
Amen. I agree. So David, how can how can the audience connect with you and get to know more about your work and what you're doing?
Yep. So you can follow me on Instagram at the.potentialist. My website is the-potentialist.com. And yeah, just message me, follow me, get some of my content. I have some good resources on my website that are completely free. I've got a free workshop. I've got two nice little journaling prompts, and one helps you get to a deeper purpose that you may have in career. And the other one can help you kind of shift your perspective on certain problems you're having and help accelerate the solution.
So what is the link to your website again, David?
The-potentialist.com.
Thank you so much for that, David. David, I'm really grateful that you took the time to share all this value with us in this podcast. And I'm hoping that at some point later time you come back to this show once again, because like what you just said was like mind blowing. It really is necessary and important. When you change your identity, you change everything.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cosmos, and I would be glad to come back.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to conclude this show by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. It's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now.
Hey there, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets you free. Also remember that your purchasing power is being diluted through inflation, and then the practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power by investing in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Also, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.